Hi friends, welcome to the channel. I'm Olivia, and if you've never seen my face before, you can consider me your fragrance fairy godmother. Today's video is a highly requested video, and that is hot and sexy date night fragrances. Now I gotta be honest with you, I've been avoiding making this video because I feel like the word sexy when it comes to fragrances is so overutilized. Because fragrances are multifaceted. They have the capacity to make you feel so much more than just one thing. They can make you feel happy. They can make you feel despair. They can make you feel nostalgia. And I think it's just a little bit flat and cheap to call every fragrance sexy. And sometimes when it comes to hot and sexy date night fragrances, it's this overplayed, over edible, sweet, make them want to eat you up sort of feel, and I'm not into it. So I have been avoiding making this video, but I thought to myself, sexy really translates to confidence. So I've selected some fragrances that make me feel confident. Now, whether you think these are date night fragrances or not is up to you, but to me, these are the fragrances that make me feel like my best self and make me feel sexy and confident. And it's not just going to be overly sweet, overly edible fragrances. So if that's what you were looking for, sorry, you're not gonna find it here. But if you wanna hear about some fragrances that will definitely give a confidence boost, I've got quite the list for you. So without further ado, sit down, have a little drink, a little snack, get settled, and let's get rolling. Now I'm just gonna get this one out of the way first out of the gate, and that is Guidance by Amouage. This fragrance to me is just the epitome of sexy because this is womanly, it is confident, it is bold and unabashed, and it is alluring. Now keep in mind, if you were to wear this, I don't think it's just your date that you would be attracting, I think it's anyone that smells you. And this fragrance is very difficult to describe because it really ticks so many boxes. It's sweet, but it's tangy. It's warm, but it's light and fluffy. It's creamy. I would say that this starts off fruity with some pear, which is a little bit of a sweet and sour combo. And then you start to get some florals coming from a really lush pink velvety rose. But it dries down with a woody muskiness. You definitely get a lot of Akigala wood on the dry down. But I'll definitely fair warn you, this fragrance is very polarizing. It either has this magnetism that just draws people to you, or it repels people away from you, because this is not a lukewarm fragrance. This will garner a reaction, whether it be very positive or very negative. So unless you know your date and you know their taste, I wouldn't use this on a first date. But when I wear this, the amount of compliments is actually absurd because this leaves such a trail, such a humongous bubble around you. And I really only get positive reactions, but online, I get a lot of comments where people say that was way too much for me. So maybe not for a first date, but for a second date when you're ready to make them fall in love, this is the one. And next up is Sirene by Fragrance du Bois. Now this is a cherry fragrance, but this is not going to be a young, playful, super sweet medicinal cherry sort of fragrance, but this is going to be a very sophisticated cherry. And as this bottle has matured, the scent has changed quite a bit because in the beginning, when I first smelled this, I got something very bright and juicy, and now I get a dark, syrupy black cherry juice. It smells dark purple, if that makes sense. So it's rich and sumptuous, sweet, but almost wine-like in its depth. The sweetness is balanced with a little bit of spiciness coming from a black pepper that gives it a bit of a raw edge. But then once this settles into the skin, you get a rich oud that doesn't go funky. You get an incense, but you also get a creamy milkiness. So imagine dark ambery woods, a rich dark cherry syrup with a little bit of creaminess over top. It's sweet, but it's also very dense and warm and inviting, but very mysterious. This is an incredibly well done cherry fragrance because sometimes cherry can really go kiddish, and this is anything but. And a girlfriend of mine was wearing this at an event we went to together, and her trail just lingered throughout the room, and it just smelled so intoxicating. Wine-like cherries, a little bit spicy, warm and woody, rich and enveloping. That is Sirene. Another that by the name has date night written all over it is Long Kiss Goodnight by Chris Collins. So this is a rose oud fragrance, but this is very interesting because when you first spray it, you get one thing, and then 20 minutes later, it is something completely different. So when you first spray it out, you are getting a juicy passion fruit. So you're getting something tangy, you're getting something fruity and sweet, but there's a slightly leather-like edge along with that sweetness coming from a saffron. So it starts off tangy and slightly leathery, but as it sits on your skin, you start to get these warm resinous qualities along with a roasted coffee, a rose, a woodiness. So this goes from tangy to rich and deep and dark and floral. It's a wild ride, but it is beautiful. This was one of those fragrances that took me a minute to understand. When I first tried it, I sprayed it and I was like, oh, that sweetness, that passion fruit is really invigorating. But then when I went back to smell it, I was like, what happened? This changed so much. And after I wore it time and time again, that roasted coffee, that velvety rose, those rich woods had this very come hither sort of feel that just called my name time and time again. I wanted to wear it over and over and over. So if you like woody, rosy, rich fragrances, but you want something that has a little bit of sparkle in the beginning, I think you would really like this. Next up, we have Dona Margarita by Pantheon Roma. Now this is a straight up robust floral fragrance. You will smell like a garden, but there's something about this that has such a class, such an elegance, such a femininity to it, but it's not deep and dark and sensual, but rather very bright and uplifting and just refined. This is a fragrance that I pull for when I'm channeling being a golden era Hollywood actress. Like if I want to feel like Marilyn Monroe, this is the kind of scent I'm reaching for. It has a tuberose that is bright and fresh, a little bit green, but also simultaneously creamy and enveloping without being too indolic or too rich and heavy and vintage. There is an amber in the base of this that gives a little bit of warmth, but it's not a super woody fragrance. If you love the scent of tuberose, if you love the scent of jasmine, this captures it in such an unadulterated way. It is pure and it is so vibrant, like you're walking through a garden of fresh flowers. This is a fragrance that I would feel full confident walking the red carpet in. And the performance is incredible. It creates a huge bubble around you and it lasts and lasts and lasts all night. But you really, really, really have to like white florals to like this one. Otherwise, for those of you who don't care for white florals, this might feel a little bit too old school. But for those of you who are like me and love a tuberose, this is perfection. Now let's say you fancy a white floral fragrance, but you don't want something that's super garden and green and fresh, but rather something that does have a little bit of mystique to it, or perhaps you wore Dona Margarita during the day and you want to take it a little bit more sultry in the night, I would go with Nuit Absolute. So this is also a tuberose and jasmine fragrance, and the tuberose in this does have that slightly sweet bubblegummy quality, but it's balanced with a lot of spiciness. So you have a cardamom, you have an herbal component coming from lavender, but then in the base is where it's that dark, sultry nighttime sort of feel coming from a tobacco, a rum, a patchouli that gives it a little grit, a little oomph. And this fragrance is really great for those of you who like a little androgyny to your fragrances, because this really balances some masculine and feminine notes, giving you an amalgamation of just pure hot and sexy date night. Sweet bubblegummy florals, spicy, boozy, and earthy, raw, gritty. I might wear this today, honestly. This, out of the entire range of Orchidee, is my favorite, with Rouge being a close second. Next up is a brand new one that I actually just recently added to my collection, and that is from Chloe, and I'm gonna butcher the name, so I apologize. Orchid de Muy. So I actually got invited by Chloe to go to Paris to try out their new fragrances in the Atelier de Fleur line, and they have 3 new fragrances that they just added, including this one, and these are supposed to be inspired by the strong scent that flowers give off at nighttime, and this is focused around the orchid. And some people know this and some people don't know this, but the orchid is what actually gives us the vanilla pod. So you have quite a strong vanillic undertone to this fragrance, but it comes off quite boozy and spicy. And in combination, to my nose, almost has a licorice-esque type feel to it. There's a styrax and a benzoin that give this a warmth and a depth, and it dries down with a musky patchouli scent. To me, this reminds me of the step above Black Opium by YSL. If you liked that fragrance and you were looking for something a little bit more boozy, a little bit more sultry and date night, I think that this will be perfect. Smooth, rich, dark vanilla with a little bit of black licoricey booziness to it, with a little bit of earthiness coming from the patchouli. Really, really stunning, and my favorite out of the entirety of the line. Speaking of boozy, who would I be if I didn't talk about my absolute baby, Fire by The Maker? And this is going to be one of those jazz club sort of fragrances because it's boozy, it's woody, it's smoky with tobacco, and does remind me a little bit of Jazz Club and By the Fireplace, but if I were to pick out of all three of them, this one, clear winner. Clear winner. We've got a vanilla, a tonka bean, a sandalwood. This is sultry without being overly feminine. Once again, for those of you who like something that's a little bit more androgynous, maybe even slightly masculine. This is like my hopes and dreams bottled into a fragrance. It's so good. I truly cannot express how much I love this fragrance. But an interesting thing to note is as this fragrance has developed in my collection, it's become ever slightly animalic. I didn't get that impression in the beginning, and now there's something that's a little bit animalic, a little dirty about it, but not in an overpoweringly, intense way. It just adds for a little bit of mystique, as if you're in a jazz club, there's smoke around you, you're sipping a Manhattan, and you're sitting on a leather couch. That's this. Speaking of leather, this next one takes it in a little bit more of a leathery direction, and that is Bois Sacre. So there's some leather fragrances that can have almost a car upholstery type of leather that smells hard and acrylic and processed. And then there's some leather fragrances that have a softness, this delicate animalic suede-like touch. That is the kind of leather that you're going to get in this. So for a long time when I said I don't care for leather, I was talking about that very abrasive, stiff leather scent, but this is a supple, soft leather. And that suppleness is coming from the note of orris, and it's a very rich, very natural smelling orris that smells almost root-like. So there is a little bit of dirtiness to it, but also waxy, creamy, powdery, and smooth. There is a little bit of hazelnut in this that kind of pushes that buttery sort of feel, giving it a nuttiness, giving it an earthiness. But there is a deep warmth coming from an oud and a tonka. So this is leathery, it's powdery and creamy, but it doesn't have a lot of sweetness. And these fragrances are very expensive. Let me preface, these are very, very expensive. But these are incredibly high quality fragrances. So this would be something that I would save for a very, very special occasion, perhaps an anniversary or a wedding or going to a really important event. This is the kind of fragrance that you really want to save for something special. Next up is an oldie but a goodie and a tried and true in my collection, and this is Montale Intense Cafe Ristretto, specifically Ristretto. Now, some people feel like Montale fragrances are quite synthetic. I don't mind that, as it boasts the most intense lasting power and sillage ever. So this is another coffee rose fragrance that is a scent profile that I'm really, really drawn to. I love the roasted, bitter depth that you get from coffee and the lush floral velvetiness that you get from rose. But in this, you are getting a strong, syrupy caramel. So it's very sweetened, almost like a latte. So imagine you have a vanilla caramel latte that's been adorned with plushy red rose petals, and then in the base you have a rich musk. So I'll fair warn you, for some people this is going to feel a little bit synthetic. For me, I really enjoy it, and I actually wore this a couple days ago on a date night, and I felt spectacular. We're gonna finish off today's video with a fragrance that I don't feel like I've given adequate shine to, but it absolutely deserves it. And now that the weather is a little bit more cool, I will be wearing on heavy rotation, and it's called Suma. So this definitely has a very prominent patchouli note in it, but it goes on the more chocolatey side. So think bitter roasted dark chocolate, like 70% dark chocolate. That's what this smells like. So it's not overly sweet. This also has a note of rum. You can see a little bit of a theme, which is hilarious because I don't drink. So I'm talking about date night fragrances all having booze in them, and I'm like, I don't partake, but I like the smell. But this is so warm and woody and almost a little bit smoky in the base. You have a tonka bean, you have a guaiac wood, giving that slightly charred sort of feel. So this one is gritty and earthy, has a little bit of sweetness, but almost a toasted woody quality in the base. Warm, rich, enveloping, beautiful. Beautiful scent and deserves more shine. I need to talk about this more because this fantastic. So I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about my date night picks. And all the fragrances that I talked about in today's video were either niche or designer. They're a little bit higher priced, so I'll definitely be making the same video in an affordable version for those of you working on a budget. Don't worry, I'm working on it. Really quickly before I let you go, I have a question for you guys. Do you like when I put the notes on the side of the screen, or do you find them distracting? Because as I'm editing, I don't love how it looks, but I do find it a little bit of a handy reference, so I could either take it or leave it. So let me know, do you like the notes being there, the pictures, or do you not like it? And if you have any tried and true date night sexy fragrances that make you feel super confident, leave them down below, and I'm gonna try to wear them this week. Thank you guys so much for being here, and until next Saturday, 10 a.m. PST, take care of yourselves, my friends.